Welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first story is with reference to the new Indian Army Chief, which we now know is going to be Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey, something that we have discussed previously as well as to who is going to be taking the top post in the Indian Army. Also, of course, under discussion is the position of CDS and who's going to be the person who's going to be the next CDS after we understand that the previous one passed away in a helicopter crash last December. We also know that General Nirvane's name has been floating around for the position of CDS, but we also know that now retired officers are also in contention, and there seems to be some change in the rules as to who really is going to be the CDS, what's going to happen with regards to these appointments, and how they're going to impact the different challenges the Indian Army faces both internally and externally, and what is going to be the impact of the leadership of Manoj Pandey on the Indian Army and in India elsewhere as well. This is going to be under discussion in our first segment. In our next segment, we will be taking a look at the situation in Palestine. In recent weeks, we've seen a spike in violence. We've seen an attack in Al-Aqsa Mosque. We've also seen that a large number of Palestinian worshippers have been injured. There have been violent clashes during the holy month of Ramadan and also the Jewish Passover holiday, something that has been coinciding and has been the cause of a lot of provocative actions. We also understand that this is something that has happened last year as well and has recurred this time around as well. What seems to be the way forward with regards to what is happening in Palestine is going to be something that we'll try and explore. Also, we'll take a look at the statements that have been coming in from the international community, from organizations such as Amnesty International, who's called what has happened in Palestine a war against humanity, also drawn parallels with apartheid, and the US statement as well, where we know that the US Secretary of State Blinken has spoken to the president of Palestine and also the foreign minister in Israel and spoken to them with regards to ending this cycle of violence, and have also supported the two-nation theory. So we'll discuss the kind of themes that are being undertaken internationally with regards to this issue and what needs to be done for the peaceful resolution and to end the suffering of the Palestinians that has been going on for so long. For this and more, we have been joined as usual in the studios by Faisal and Farrukh Pitafi. And for our first segment in the show, we have been joined by two guests online, Mr. Shalinder Singh, who's a veteran of the Indian Army, and Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua, who's President APRI. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us today. Before we move on to further discussion with regards to the appointment of Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey, we also want to take a look back at what we discussed on our show the 13th of January earlier this year, where Faisal spoke about who the next Army Chief is going to be. Let's see.
So there are two options right now. There are two equations, I must say. Number one is that if Nirvane becomes CDS, then of course the two generals next to him, I'm talking about General Mohanty and General Joshi, both of them, they will be getting retired. And then the third one, the one we have been talking again and again about, is Lieutenant General Pandey. But at the same time, we need to know that he hails from Engineers Corps, and there are analysts who speak of this as well, that he having Eastern Command was a blunder itself. He hails from a very important city, Nagpur. Why Nagpur? Because Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh hails from Nagpur, and he was born in Nagpur, and now there is a large number of analysts, they believe that he, along with his family, they have been part of RSS since the day one, and now when he's Lieutenant General, he's been getting constantly favors. And we know for the fact that in recent times, of course, lots of things happened in Eastern Command under his nose while he was commanding there, and nobody said anything to him. This shows that he is constantly getting favors.
Well, you heard the conversation and what was being discussed with reference to the new Chief of Army Staff in India. Faisal, this was something that we discussed earlier on this year. How are you so sure about it?
Sana, first of all, let me tell you about what I was sure about at that time as well. I knew that there were, talks going that, urgently CDS should be, obviously, Nirwane should be promoted to CDS so that General Mohanty can take over as Chief of Army Staff, because at that time, General Mohanty was Vice Chief of Army Staff. And obviously, they did not want, General Nirwane did not want General Pandey to become next Chief or Vice Chief of Army Staff, because he could sense that there was a rapid saffronization taking place of the Indian Army, and he has fears, still he has fears. And now when he wants to be CDS, once again there are three personalities within BJP who are against him becoming CDS. One of them, of course, is Amit Shah, the other one Yogi Adityanath, and the third one is Rajnath Singh. All three major people of BJP, they are against him becoming CDS. The only reason behind it is that he is against the saffronization of the Indian Army. He believes that if Indian Army is saffronized, eventually India would suffer at the hands of saffronized Indian Army. And if we talk about General Manoj Pandey, of course, we know that he hails from Nagpur, and we now know that he was lobbied for. He was lobbied for by the RSS, by the politicians from BJP, especially the state. And we know that states do lobby for the generals, and they have lobbied. And to some extent, it seems like even if there was an opportunity for a change within the Indian Army after the Bipin Rawat, still that was not taken just because of the political reasons. And right now, Indian Army is extremely politicized, and I think Nirwane has the concerns about it.
All right. So, Farrukh, does this mean that perhaps the way that we've been looking at the position of CDS with reference to General Nirwane is not something that is going to be an eventuality? Of course, there are discussions of retired officers also being in contention, and perhaps an Air Force officer as well.
Look, Sana, here's a simple fact. The fact is that I've literally washed my hands about India. I've actually given up all hope regarding India. Why? Because in South Asia, it seems that there is such a thing as Murphy's Law, being the law of physics. Whatever bad thing can happen will happen, right? This saffronization of India, or for that matter, their armed forces, or for that matter, their police, the judiciary, any other institution, do you honestly think that anybody can now stop it? I don't think so, right? It is a fait accompli, and it is going to happen. So I give up on India, and I hope whatever they do, although it is astounding that any comment that is given in good faith, that also seems to push their buttons. So I am giving up on India, and I think that one day they realize that people who were telling them not to go down this path were their friends, not enemies.
Right. I understand that, of course. But when we look at the situation, I would still suggest perhaps not to give up on the situations around the world where people are suffering, and perhaps not on humanity in general. Who knows, maybe some sane voices in India will actually flourish. Mr. Shailendra Singh, when we look at the situation, considering Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey's appointment and the way different factors have contributed perhaps to his selection, and now that we're talking about the saffronization of the Indian Army as well, do you think that this fact that this appointment has taken place is something which also is quite evident of the fact that there is a saffronization that exists within the Indian Army, and that there needs to be something done about it?
Thank you very much. Allow me to just tell you that it's a pleasure for me to join your show from Lucknow, and Lucknow happens to be the capital city for UP. Today I'm here. Now, coming to this 2 points. One is whatever has been said about General Pandey, sir. Let me tell you one thing. I think India and Pakistan need to be congratulated that once again a very professional, competent person has become or has been designated to be the next chief. It's a very good thing to happen. At least we will have a balanced man, and especially his junior, because he's the first chief in that. Incidentally, some talk is on by a few people that first time engineer officer. Let me tell you, we have had army commanders, army level people that's there from engineering. There are less, we discussed once in a while, there are less because the engineer corps is a small one. You don't have that many options from that. Infantryans are more, so you have a fair share of chief coming from infantry. Coming to the appointment part, which is more critical. Well, yes, with a lot of conviction, I will tell you, the states can lobby, states will lobby, states have been lobbying that why not have a chief from their own state if he is in the run. Now, coming to be in the run, nobody can actually calculate uh, from a corps commander to an army commander level that whether he will finally become the chief or not. One can do a very considered opinion on that based on, because there's no rocket science, I've seen it happening, that you can feel that as per seniority who goes where. Now, that's like what happened to Bipin Rawat sir is definitely not catered for. It is definitely not catered. It does bring a little uncertainty. It does bring a little upheaval that now what? And so is the government. So there is no question. There is no question that just because somebody belongs to Nagpur is going to get the leverage. I don't think so. It's a matter of security, it's a matter of competency. Otherwise,
All
I'm
right.
not sure.
All right, Mr. Jalinder Singh, I'll get back to you about this as well. Brigadier Janjua, when we look at the situation with regards to the appointment of Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey, as Mr. Jalinder Singh was saying, there is talk about how he, of course, hails from Engineer Corps, and we understand that this is perhaps something that hasn't really happened in India. But when we look at the kind of contributions that this is going to make in terms of his performance or in terms of the way that Engineer Corps is perhaps looked at or future appointments, how do you think that is going to play out, and why is it that when we look at the situation with reference to his appointment coming in from Engineer Corps, does that add any value or any difference in the way that the Indian Army institution is going to be run? I believe you yourself hail from Engineer Corps as well, so perhaps you can give us an insight whether or not the kind of factors implement in this decision.
Well, I would like to say that the appointment seems to be perfectly in keeping with the standard norms. There's a departure in the sense that for the first time in the history, an officer from the Corps of Engineers has made it to the top slot, which is a rarity. And it is because there are less number of engineer officers in 3-star slots, and out of them, by law of probability, it becomes very difficult for someone from engineers to rise to the level of Chief of Army Staff. But having said this, a cursory glance on the profile of the new COS shows that he's commanded an infantry brigade, a mountain brigade, he's a Camberley graduate, he's had a Eastern Command experience, then he's commanded Nicobar and Andaman command, which is very important. So he is overall very well groomed for this appointment. It's not the question that it is something that we should consider out of the way. And he's also reputed to be a technologically savvy guy who lays a lot of premium on integration of technology. We all know the nature of warfare is changing. Technology is shaping a lot of changes in the nature and also the grammar of war. And somebody who has that proclivity, I think that would bode well for the institution. But where there is a cause of concern, obviously, is that the time gap that was allowed to him to be elevated. So it raises a few, hackles that maybe it was a politically motivated decision. But then all such decisions are politically motivated in democracies, as we can see in the rest of the countries as well. The saffronization and the Hinduization of Indian Army and changing of its ethos from the secular to Hindutva-driven institution is also a cause of concern amongst the Indian analysts also. I've read Prakash Menon, Ashok Mehta commenting on this aspect, and they speak with a lot of concern about the band playing Jai Jagdish Hare, which was never the case earlier on, because Indian Army had jealously guarded its secular and apolitical ethos. And there is a propensity, because there's a government which actively encourages this kind of Hindutva RSS ideology at all tiers of the government. We know that General Bipin Rawat, once he was chief of the army staff in 2016, he was made.
Colonel Shailen, Colonel Shailendra,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about, we know that the Eastern Command was commanded by General Manoj Pandey previously. I just wanted to know whether in the Eastern Command, while he was commanding there, we know that there were few incidents in which, of course, lots of lives they were wasted, especially the 18 lives in December. Number one. Number two, we know that Manoj Pandey initially was sent there to improve the infrastructure, MSRs and all of them, because we know from the Chinese side, Arunachal Pradesh, they were constantly making the air bases and all, but on the Indian side, of course, the improvements were needed. I just wanted to know whether the goals were met out there or not, or if we look at the other smaller states, the Seven Sisters, the law and order was maintained.
Before I answer, Raja, would you allow me that I have to clarify that point brought out by the Brigadier Saab, that particular Om Jai Jagdish Hare. Let me tell you, sir, I belong to the same corps in which it happened. The officer, the commandant of that center is my junior. I know him very well. And what a beautiful officer he is. Now coming to the point that Om Jai Jagdish Hare. Sir, I would have actually granted that yes, it would have been saffronization of that particular parade. Had, mark my word, had the Bible, the Quran and the Guru Granth Sahib also not taken along with it. Yes, I do agree. Singing of that particular prayer, which is more Indian. Let me tell you, sir, I have been in a South Indian regiment, pure South Indian regiment also. I have been in a Sikh regiment also, Sikhlai also. It doesn't mean, you'll be shocked. A Muslim officer can sing in my regiment, Om Jai Jagdish Hare, so well that his pronunciation is better than mine. So we don't have to worry. Yes, there are threats that there could be some kind of saffronization taking place, but the system in itself of army is too great, is too strong to allow that to happen. Now coming to what Raja had asked. Raja sir, I can only tell you one thing. And for the complete panel, Brigadier Saab will be able to agree much more. After being a colonel, you are no more part of engineer if you have come to a journal card. You've got nothing to do with engineers. You only understand engineering better. So coming to any kind of, talks which were on in earlier shows also, that some bridge or something up and down, he has got nothing to do with it. Coming to the point about, improvement in infrastructure. Let me tell you, sir, it is not the responsibility of the army commander to do that. He is not supposed to. The states are supposed to bring in infrastructure. The army commander can only bring in operational infrastructure required by the army, and which I'm very sure you would know by now that it has been upgraded, and there has been objections also by China, by left, right, center, everybody. Those are a separate discussion totally. Coming to the competence of the man as a, what should I call, as a Eastern Army commander, I'm sure the government, the army, the other army commanders, the chief would have seen it more than adequately before they would have got him as the vice chief. There would have been a very clear indicator that yes. Now coming to this point, which is being harped on too many times out in media, that the other two generals got retired just because somebody wanted him to be the chief. No, sir. How can you do that? There could have been another accident. There could have been another heart attack. There could have been anything. You see, these things are not decided based on something. Lobbying part, I had agreed with you. But this is not. You see, it amounts to something like to make somebody chief. Then would it amount to that there were few earlier journals also who were, eliminated from the lineup. It doesn't happen in army because that is not the character of our.
Colonel Saab, regarding lobbying, the question is not whether lobbying takes place or not. The question is whether who is actually lobbying. We are talking about a body, an organization. We are talking about RSS, which actually continued for so much time, which was repeatedly banned by Indian state. Now it might be in power, but there seems to be one clear message that it is ideologically bound and its ideology is Hindu Rashtra. So if they are lobbying for you, should it be considered a good sign, sir?
Definitely not. My army is supposed to stay away from any kind of lobbying, any kind of religious fanatism. Totally. I'll agree on that. However, sir, I forgot to come to that point that you gave up on India. Let me tell you, sir, let us not give up hope. There is 90% of us are good. So let's not concede to 10%. Now coming to saffronization and RSS. Sir, tell me one thing. As a religious group, why will they not have a right to do what we think it is right? It is very simple. I have a very beautiful leader called as OSC. He, hear him, and he is the fanatism which he puts out, his talk, his lectures, and his tests in rallies is so his brother had to be arrested. But still, not only the justice were allowed. So why will it say that if they after maybe 70 years, whatever years, if the RS was said something, we will have to take it in our street. That is the price of democracy you pay. You have to allow a religion.
Because you actually addressed the point I had raised at the start, sir. I understand that this must give you hope that so many people are good. Actually, that breaks my heart. That something beautiful, or at least something that I thought beautiful, is might be going to the wolves. The way things are crumbling, the way bulldozers are actually bulldozing people's houses in Delhi, and then of course the institutional indoctrination as well. That frightens me, because for a long time I kept on saying that India is a good model to emulate. Now, I don't think I can argue.
I would like to go to
Shalinder Singh, I'll give you a chance to respond to that as well, but I want to go to Brigadier Janjua and talk to him also with reference to the appointment of the CDS and the way that the rules have been changed, perhaps with regards to getting in more people and increasing the pool and increasing the retired officers as well as being part of who can actually be the next CDS as well. And I'll talk more about that from Singh Saab as well, but I want to understand how important or what sort of a contribution does this actually make when we look at changing the rules, especially with institutions like armies, when we look at different scenarios where perhaps these rules need to be changed? Is it on grounds of political reasons or other vested interests, or is it because it actually adds more value? With reference to this particular decision, do you think that this is because of some other factors, or do you think that this is meant to perhaps bring someone on the post who's going to be the most relevant man?
Yes, I would like to respond, but first a bit about ethos of Indian Army, and that we all know since British time was Naam, Namak, Nishan. I'm sure Colonel Saab would understand that. And if that ethos continues, I guess India will also benefit and the region would also benefit. But there is a danger. You see, we saw General Bipin Rawat. He was very keen and he was very closely integrated with the BJP government, and some accuse him in his enthusiasm, he was the main moving spirit behind the Balakot strikes. So tactical expedient actions are planned for career goals. So that's the only concern that dogs us at this point of time, but I'm sure if their sector ethos prevails, that thing will be taken care of. Now, coming over to the appointment of CDS, I think it is a well-considered decision on part of Indian leadership to ease General Naravane into the new slot, because General Bipin Rawat was also very good terms with him, and he was being groomed actually for that assignment. And he's also the senior most service amongst the services chiefs now. And I think that time gap that was given was to allow him to get into the normal rhythm of time so that this succession, because of that accident, doesn't change. The CDS appointment is very important, but its rules are quite flexible. There is no, fixed criterion as yet. It's just that the age limit of 65 is imposed. And within that, there is flexibility. Even retired officers could be chosen, services chiefs. There was concern that this is going to be the second CDS, and after him, maybe General Pandey is groomed to be the next CDS because he's just 59 years old. And by the time he retires, he would be 62. So he'll have 3 more years for his CDS slot. So that way, a seamless transition might have been planned. But it is
6
good
years of leadership,
for them
sir.
institutionally. There is one element, though. They have just done away with a third member of committee of selection. That was Minister of Defense. Now it's just Prime Minister and the Home Minister, which is Amit Shah, who will decide, who's going to be Army Chief and who's going to be CDS. So,
Colonel Shailendra. Colonel Shailendra, I just wanted to ask about if we were, right now, if we were in early February or late January, and the situation was that General Bipin Rawat obviously the plane has crashed and he has died, and now is the situation in which urgent decisions should be coming for promotions, especially to the CDS, and then of course, the Chief of Army Staff, if he becomes the CDS, then the Vice Chief of Army Staff becomes the Chief. At that time, it is understood that that General Narwane wanted the change to happen straight away, and he took a couple of the offices of CDS. He was actually holding them as well. DOD, I think one of them was DOD, the other one I'm not sure of. And he was already taking care of them offices. Number one. Number two, he wanted it to take place at that time. Don't you think at that time the politics was played, and the politicians, they did not want this to happen only for one reason, that they already had a man in their mind and they were already meeting him, and related to the future, they already had a plan. So that's why they did not promote General Narwane to CDS at that time, and now General Narwane does not want to be one because he knows that he has anti-Narwane people within the BJP, especially Amit Shah and Rajnath Singh ji. They are not in the favor of him becoming CDS. That is why we are seeing 2 more names popping up. One of them, of course, is Air Marshal Bhaduria, and the other one, for just a slight time, he was being propagated as well, and that was General Ranbir Singh. But of course, it is not final because he has so many foes within the politics as well. Am I right, sir? Or the decision of CDS should have been taken now and it shouldn't have been delayed from February?
If I could not be quoted wrongly, my evaluation, very frank, honest, theoretical circumstances which you have just now narrated, yes, it's political. Because there is no denying the fact all these positions get decided politically. There's no denying. So, feel, or if somebody has to evaluate it, that no, it is because of politics in it, politics is already there. I am going to deny it. Chief is not a army. Chief is made by political bosses. So whatever coming to this, the talk that rules of the game have been changed and more people have been elected. I very surely if you see this post Indian Army and to the it is some time to start.
Your audio is breaking
Yes.
up, sir.
So then only having a become CDS, let's also consider for future also to increase the pool of officers and see if we can be benefited out of that. Because today's situation may not be good. him tomorrow. So I think no harm coming to that whether, should I say, uh, only for principally.
Mr. Shailendra Singh, unfortunately, there's a problem. We are not able to understand you quite accurately. There's a problem with the audio, but we'll come back to you and hopefully it'll be better then. If you can try and do something about it, it'd be great. Brigadier Janjua, when we look at what Mr. Shailendra Singh was saying with reference to how blatant the political involvement is in the appointment, and it exists, and I'm happy to hear that he's honest about that.
Yeah.
But when we look at the situation, the impact that is going to have, it means that when we talk about perhaps the saffronization of the Indian Army, that's something which is inevitable, because if it is politically motivated, then right now that is what we've seen in different positions, and now perhaps the army as well.
And sir, again, regarding giving up hope, I just wanted to quote Edmund Burke. The only thing needed, necessary for the triumph of evil is for the good people to do nothing.
Oh, yes.
At this moment, if we are talking about 98% good people, then why are they not doing anything?
True.
Brigadier Janjua?
Brigadier
Okay,
Janjua,
so
sir.
I'd like to respond. Yes, I alluded to that concern earlier on also, because we saw Bipin Rawat's rise. He was a professional officer, but then he quoted favors with the BJP leadership, and he actively lobbied to be the Chief of Defence Staff. And one of the actions under him, that was the Balakot raid, which was totally irresponsible, unnecessary, that brought both nuclear-armed neighbors to the brink of hair-trigger environment of under these nuclearized environments to the brink of war. So that was just for career advancement. So those are the accusations. And once a lot of politics is played, a lot of ideology is brought into these promotions, then this danger exists, this brinkmanship. But unfortunately now that is part of the political system that they have. That's part of the selection system that they have created. And I just said that there is a committee which comprised Defense Minister, Union Home Minister, and Prime Minister. Now it comprises just two. And Amit Shah, we know, is a hardcore ideologue and the Prime Minister. But having said that, the more important thing that we should look at is what this appointment is going to do. In fact, this Chief of Defence Staff is going to act as a very important single point, not only advisory channel, but it would be a permanent seat of Chief of Staff Committee. Because earlier on, as I mentioned in my previous discourse, that during the Kargil war, the Cabinet Committee on Security was not broached by VK Singh because there was no consensus amongst the Air Chief and then the Naval Chief on enlarging the conflict, and especially the use of air, which wasted 3-4 months, and Indian Army had to pay a prohibitively big cost. So that is why this appointment was created.
Right, absolutely. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Shailendra Singh and Brigadier Janjua, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We'll hopefully be able to continue our discussion in further shows as well. Yes, Farrukh.
I just wanted to say one thing. A comment is pending, and somebody needs to be congratulated in this program for actually calling it out or actually saying it. It can be, I think it can be Raja Faisal or it can be me. I tell you why. There's such a thing as reverse psychology. There is a series called the Billions, right? In that, when he is about to be evicted from a board, the hero actually confronts somebody willingly and knowingly, so that when he opposes him, his project actually succeeds. So Raja Faisal has been flagging this thing that Pandey is going to be the head of Indian Army. I've been opposing the idea, and now he is there. So you can also thank me.
I tell you,
you can also thank me for this.
You know what, Farrukh? At that time, you were right, because even somewhere down the line, I had the calculation that if Narwane, if Narwane is accepted as a CDS at that time, then General Mohanty would have been the next chief. not the General Manoj Pandey. So you were right.
No, no,
but,
I wasn't right. I wasn't wrong. The whole thing
You
is,
only
I
have
was.
your calculation was perfectly fine.
My calculation was not based on any calculation. That was
thing.
based on aspiration, and aspiration needs such an end. So General Pandey definitely should be thanking me as well, because I was the only opposed man.
Politics has played its role, and that is why General Manoj
In any way,
Pandey is there.
All right.
in any case, congratulations, Raja Faisal.
All right.
Your running horse won.
Let's move on to our next segment now, where we look at the situation in Palestine, which of course is very unfortunate and tragic and has been for a very long time. We've seen another attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque, something unfortunately that has become a recurring feature in the area. For this, we have been joined by Haysam Nasir, who's a Palestinian journalist. Thank you very much, Mr. Haysam, for being with us and being part of the show. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, I'm here.
All right. Mr. Haysam, when we look at what has happened in the recent days and weeks in Al-Aqsa Mosque and the way that the situation has aggravated, we understand that this is something that we've seen perhaps last year as well, and this has been repeated in various incidents throughout many years and decades. But when we look at the way that the situation is handled or dealt with in terms of international reactions, that always seem to fall short. We've seen now that the Amnesty International has also spoken, various human rights organizations previously in the past have also spoken. We've seen the US also giving its own statements. But again, all of these amount to perhaps only words and not actions. How do we make this shift?
Palestinians on the ground have given up not only on the international reaction, but even on their own leadership, which failed also to pressurize the Israeli side to stop harassing and pressurizing and killing Palestinians in Aqsa Mosque and in Gaza. We have seen also some attacks in Gaza in the last few days. The main reason we see a little bit more tension in the last 2 years during Ramadan is that it's Ramadan and some of the Jewish Eids or celebrated occasions
Passover.
are at the same time. For 3-4 years they are to some extent, because Ramadan, according to Hilal, it's coming 10 days ahead every year. So this, for a few years, there will be clash between the two occasions. In such occasion, in the Jewish culture, they celebrate specific flag celebration in the same area, in the Aqsa Mosque, which the Prime Minister of Israel have stopped some of the extremist Israelis day before yesterday and yesterday from attacking inside the mosque, justifying his decision that this is to protect also the Israeli military from clashes with Palestinians. So on the ground, Palestinians have succeeded in pressurizing the Israelis to feel threatened that if you attack us, there will be a reaction. But on international level,
right. One second, Faisal. But Haysam, what you're saying is perhaps a riot. How is that helping the situation for Palestinians in general, or actually moving towards a direction where we can see some peace? Because I understand that they're able to give a reaction to what's happening, but that's only happening on ground. And at the end of the day, it's people who are suffering.
This is an illusion for Palestinians. I don't think any Palestinian believes that peace is coming soon. Maybe if the international community politics, the balance is restored after decades, not after years. But right now, or the American policies change. But right now, American policies are dominating in the international arena, especially when it comes to Middle East and Palestinian issue. And Americans are extremely supportive of Israeli policies, even if Israeli policies are committing international crimes or injustice against Palestinians or denying their basic human rights, which are guaranteed by international law. So we see imbalance in international level. So it's translated very clearly in Palestinian issue that this imbalance is making Israelis do what they want, and Palestinians have themselves to protect. So on the ground also, please come. What's your question?
Yeah, Haytham, Raja Faisal here, and we are very good friends, of course, you know. I just wanted to ask about, you remember Trump obviously accepted Jerusalem as the de facto capital city of Israel. Do you think that that step has actually further ignited the hatred amongst different religions in Jerusalem, or you know, the current government, the current president of the America, he needs to come up with a different solution, a solution that is acceptable to Muslims, Christians, and Jews equally of Jerusalem. And do you think that America needs to play its role right now?
And by the way, if you allow me to add to this question, because it is going to be the question of flip side, regarding what happened on the eve of Passover, there seemed to be something very clear. There's a pattern. Every sensitive hour, whenever there is one, may it be Sheikh Jarrah, may it be Passover, there are elements who actually seek to provoke the other side. And then we see clashes and violence. You were saying that Palestinians have prevailed and they have convinced the Israelis to respect their boundaries. But what do you do with such elements?
Okay. First part was about international arena and the American agenda and Trump plan. Trump plan was a justification for a plan which was, or a deal which was about to be signed between specific countries in the Gulf and Israel for their own benefit. It has nothing to do with Palestinian issue, because they did not benefit Palestinians in anything. Palestinian leadership, even what some Palestinians consider corrupt leadership, considered that deal as a corrupt deal, and it's against Palestinian interests. So there was a different type of deal between some Gulf countries and America and Israel about other issues in the region, which was framed and used the umbrella of the Abraham agreement to present such a solution. But it wasn't a practical solution or a realistic solution to present peace for Palestinians or Jewish or Christians. This is first thing. Secondly, it's not a religious issue to present a solution from religious perspective to it. Muslims, Christians, and Jewish used to live in peace in Jerusalem before. What came is the political factor, is the occupation factor. When there is occupation, when there is one side who has the power, who has the military, who's killing others and attacking them, then it's not religious anymore. It's a political issue. Then the other party will react with their means and wealth, etc., etc. So this is the first part. The Americans should present a new solution, yes. But are the Americans interested? That's a different question. Because their interest is with Gulf countries, with other countries in the region, and with Israelis, is more than to give justice to Palestinians. Okay?
Right.
If I go to the second question about the specific groups which are provoking violence, Israeli community is like any other community. There are some moderates and there are some extremists, there are some political powers and some other powers which are negotiating with Palestinians and other international forces.
Yeah, Haytham, do you think that Britain can play any role in it, because they are the ones who were actually there and created all of this first?
Who can play a role? Americans?
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom is the evil who created this mess. This is how they are perceived in Palestine, because they promised Israelis with this land, which wasn't their land. But now, what's the international influence of UK? What's their influence in UN? What's their influence over American policies? America is the most dominating power in the international system now.
All right,
UK can play
Mr. Haytham, perhaps you can also go back to the previous question, because I don't believe it has been fully answered yet. And if you can also add to how it's going to also impact the way the world actually views the conflict, because I understand that there are all sorts of elements on ground, but when we look at perhaps statements from Blinken as well, who said that both sides should end the cycle of violence, it seems that the conflict is being portrayed as two-sided, when in fact a lot that happens on ground is hostile and seems to be one side just targeting another.
Let me litigate the point that you earlier made. I just wanted to understand, you were saying that even at this moment the US government is actually supporting Israel no matter what. But if I recall correctly, President Obama from the same party when he was president actually came under huge fire because Netanyahu actually boycotted his request and then went and addressed the joint session of the Congress. And then he also did something very interesting regarding overall situation. He kept on lobbying openly for Trump in those days. Don't you think that this current administration is more friendly towards friendlier towards the Palestinians?
Democrats in general are more realistic in their approach. If we talk about Obama or Biden, but that doesn't make them less of a supporter to Israel. They change the approach, a different flavor. It's same how Democrats or Republicans talk about Kashmir or talk about Indian Pakistani tension. They change the language. They give better statements. They might stop some types of pressure, which is coming from Israel with or against Palestine. Overall, the entire American Congress is under a huge influence of the Israeli lobby. And this is not breaking news. It has been there for more than 30 years. The Israeli lobby in Congress is very strong. Whoever comes as president is under their pressure one way or another. Obama might have been strong in some areas, but not in every area. Clinton was much stronger. Clinton had presented.
Yeah, I have, Sana, very quickly, I have a rather abrasive question. The question is about this Israeli lobby. It must be there. But the question is, at this moment, Israel is one country. There are multiple and very rich Arab kingdoms. Why is it that we don't hear any Arab lobby there, despite so much investment in America and elsewhere?
Right. Very quickly, Mr. Haytham, we're almost out of time.
Very interesting question. And the answer is very simple, because Gulf countries or Islamic countries are busy in their own internal conflicts.
Yeah.
So the lobbying used in Washington is used for the Empire Fulana against X against Y, not entire Gulf countries or entire Islamic countries lobbying in Washington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haytham Nasir, for joining us and being a part of the show and talking to us at length at what is going on in Palestine and what needs to be done. That's all we have from the debate for now. We'll see you tomorrow.